Okay, today we're going to continue looking at India in this time period, and then we're also going to look and move to China a little bit. In the remainder of class, after we're done with this video, you're going to get the chance to finish looking at the culture of the Mauryan and Gupta dynasties. So yesterday we left off with Asoka's death and the breakup of the Mauryan Empire into separate kingdoms. It's going to remain that way for about 500 years. So it's not until about the 4th century AD CE, or as Rome's declining, the Gupta dynasty is forming and being reunited. So India begins to reunite again when Chandragupta I, who's not related to Chandragupta Maurya, reunites that old kingdom, and not only of the Magadha, but also reunites the kingdom of the Mauryan Empire, and starts to expand and is further expanded under his son, Samudragupta. And so here we can see the expanse of the Gupta Empire. It's not quite as large as the Mauryan Empire, as it doesn't take these large areas of the Deccan Plateau in western India, but it takes a significant amount of the territory, starting with the Ganges River Valley, and then of course extended all the way up to the Indus River Valley. In the most significant feature as you work through your packet and work through the sources about the Gupta is that many historians regard the Gupta as a golden age of Indian culture. And that's going to be the main focus that you're reading today. One of the reasons the Gupta represents such a golden age is because there's a significant amount of trade in this time period coming to India, and Indian goods are leaving. India is going to be connected to the trade routes connecting east to west, that stretch starting in China and making their way to the Mediterranean. So the development of the Silk Road is going to do a lot for cultural diffusion and items coming into India. And Gupta, and I'll spend most of the time letting you focusing in your reading, but the Gupta are going to represent this great expansion of learning, knowledge, art, poetry, architecture, and it's going to be a period of prosperity in Indian history. So, furthermore, Buddhism was set in motion, really, as far as the state-sponsored religion of the Mauryans, and gets a lot of patronage from Ashoka. It's going to continue through the Gupta, and in the Gupta Empire, Buddhism is going to flourish, temples are going to continue to grow, and Buddhism is going to continue to spread in India, despite the fact that Hinduism still remains the overwhelming majority religion in the country. So as you read, you're reading on the Gupta, I want you to focus on the importance of trade, religion, in art, and the growth of sciences as well. And think of the Gupta in a way as not only a golden age, but almost a renaissance of Indian culture and learning, and this long period of the breakup of about 500 years between the fall of the Mauryan and the rise of the Gupta. For us as well in this unit, we need to revisit China. And we're going to spend the next few minutes looking at the next couple dynasties that existed in Chinese history. We last left off on looking at the Han Dynasty and its eventual collapse. The Han Dynasty is existing at a relatively the same time period as the Roman Empire. It develops this great trade empire. And everything that we examine with the Han, but the Han are going to collapse about 220. So they collapse roughly about 250 years before the Roman Empire is finally comes to an end. So it ends a little bit early. And there's about a 300-year intermediate period between the Han Dynasty and the next dynasty to reunite the great river valleys of China, the Yellow River and the Yangtze. And so the intermediate periods are really common in history, as we've seen with Egypt, and you could say with India, these periods of unity, and then the destruction of empires, and then kind of smaller kingdoms are set up, and then they become reunited. So the Sui, we're not going to spend much time on the Sui dynasty, but it's the first dynasty to follow the Han. And one of the main reasons I'm not going to spend much time on the Sui dynasty is because the Sui dynasty isn't around very long. It's only about roughly 40 years of history. The Sui are most important for reunifying China around 581, but it only lasts the reign of 2 emperors. So there's only 2 emperors in the Sui dynasty, and the Sui dynasty is going to collapse when people revolt against the Sui. One of the reasons that the Sui sees revolt is because in a lot of ways, they're kind of oppressive, and there's a little bit of a reflection of the Qin dynasty here. Sui emperors forced people to rebuild much of the Great Wall. There's a lot of forced labor in heavy taxation. Um, Also, there was a great building project that took a lot of labor as well called the Grand Canal. And so it was an amazing feat of construction for the Sui in the time period, but it also represents, in a way, kind of an oppression as a lot of people had to work. The Grand Canal was an attempt through a canal system to connect the great river valleys of China, allowing the two centers of its civilization to move goods and people quickly across land and exchange those wealth. But despite those architectural and building achievements, the Sui are only going to last 40 years and collapse in 618, and they're overthrown. They're overthrown, and in this chaos of this revolt, the Tang dynasty is going to come to power, and the Tang dynasty is going to be a significantly longer dynasty for about 300 years. So far we've from the Han we've had the short period of the Sui, and that way it's a lot like the Qin as well, and then into the Tang. The Tang are going to expand their borders to really match old Han territory. They're going to be successful in that expansion. They're going to be successful in reunifying much of Chinese territory, and then reconnecting China to significant trade routes, and making the Silk Roads once again very efficient. One of the couple of the features that we want to know about the Tang is, number one, in the Tang dynasty is going to be the dynasty in which Buddhism is going to begin to flourish greatly again in China, or not again, for the first time. So Buddhism is going to become sponsored by the state. Despite Confucianism being an important social philosophy, Buddhism is going to start to be pushed as a religious philosophy. And it's going to grow. Buddhism is going to remain very important in China for a really long time. The other feature I want to spend some time on with the Tang is looking at the reign of Empress Wu, the only female emperor in Chinese history to call herself emperor and to take that title. Looking at this map of the Tang, you can see the Tang territory is quite large and includes areas that are not considered part of China today. So the Tang is huge. So they're very good at military conquest, and you can see that the Tang push into the borders of Korea. They push into what we know today as Vietnam. They're going to extend into Central Asia, and definitely connecting themselves with trade coming across in Asia and bringing in wealth and power. And that wealth and power allows the Tang to remain stable for about 300 years until their collapse. Here's Tang Taizong, the founder of the Tang dynasty. Empress Wu, we're going to have an activity on when I return to class, and that's what we're going to emphasize a little bit, is the reign of Empress Wu, because she's one of the more important figures of the Tang dynasty. Not only because she's a woman in power in a very patriarchal state. Keep in mind that patriarchy is really powerful in China because patriarchy is really powerful in Confucianism, and she's able to get away from all that and become empress. In our reading, we're going to focus on our return is the fact that she's going to effectively use her reign as empress to push Buddhism is a religion in replace of traditional religion of China, which was Taoism. Confucianism, again, not being a religion, and she's going to replace that. So when I get back, we're going to look at an Empress Wu activity. Until then, for the rest of the period, you're going to continue working on your packets on the Gupta and Mauryan empires, looking at the culture and impacts of them. Once done, you may work on chapter 7.1, which also emphasizes the Gupta and Mauryan, and we'll examine a little bit more on what's going on in China in this period, and we'll look more at the Tang Dynasty and Empress Wu.